This is one of the greatest war museums in the world. The Imperial War Museum is huge, with more than 33 million items. Everything from an 83-year-old warship to priceless vintage aircraft.
Oh, wow.
It's a place where an extraordinary range of specialists
So up here is where we keep all our samples of heads.
work with world-leading experts
Any object tells a story if you let it, about why we are where we are today.
to help tell some of the most important stories from our past.
My great-granddad opened the door for other black recruits.
Now, we've been given unprecedented access,
Quite nervous about today. I'm not sure if it's going to work as well as we want it to.
not only behind the scenes of this national institution,
This is the mothership for the museum.
but also to the unique world-class resource. 23,000 hours of rare film footage shot in the throes of war.
It gives us that gateway to understand what actually went on 100 years ago.
Which will help us bring to life the stories of the museum
Do you want to see where I was sitting?
Yeah.
Yeah?
as they design state-of-the-art galleries,
Oh, wow. Seems quite bright.
Yeah, this is bright.
solve historical mysteries,
You can tell from the letter that he went over knowing he was almost certain to be killed.
and preserve the most important objects from our past.
If we lose this, there's not another one in somebody's shed. So this is it.
In the grand atrium of IWM London, the crowds are back for the summer rush.
It's great to get back to the museum, get back to work.
Seeing everything today is just really nice.
Have a good day.
Inside what used to be the infamous Bedlam Asylum, the IWM's flagship site tells the story of more than a century of conflict around the world. Across the country, from the purpose-built IWM North in Manchester to the mighty HMS Belfast on the Thames, millions of visitors each year, from curious families to history buffs, come to learn about our past and to see some of the most impressive military machines ever made.
So this is the Hannipage Victor.
In the conservation hangar at IWM Duxford sits the Victor, one of the most spectacular aircraft in the museum's collection. Head of Conservation John White is overseeing a £500,000 project to restore her to her former glory.
Yeah, you look at it, it's an iconic aircraft and it is such like a spaceship, you know. So far advanced. It's a wonderful, wonderful shape. If you were a child, you would have drawn a picture of this. It's really like Dan Dare, it's brilliant.
But as curator Carl Warner is quick to point out, this is not a plane that was designed to look pretty. In the middle of the Cold War, this was a war machine designed to instill fear.
They're not flown for fun. These are flown with a purpose. This had the capability of carrying one of Britain's early air-dropped nuclear weapons. At the end of the Second World War, the whole idea is that Britain is going to develop its own nuclear deterrent. America's not going to share the nuclear secrets with Britain. But to deliver that, it needs aircraft, it needs bombers that are capable of carrying an enormous nuclear weapon 2,000 miles to the Soviet Union. Inside one of these aircraft would be carried a nuclear weapon many times more powerful than the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There will be fleets of these, not just British, but American. On the Soviet side, similar. In 1962, of course, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Bomber Command were at a readiness to drop an enormous nuclear weapon on Russia. But at the heart of that is a pretty shocking and revealing truth about the men who served in these aircraft and the people who looked after them. And that is, if they had been used, if all of their training had gone into operational action with a nuclear weapon, the chances are that means that everything they know and love is gone. One of the things we get used to thinking when pilots and crews fly off in aircraft to go to war is that the people back home are going to be safer than they are. That's not the case here. They are leaving behind what is likely to be a world that is coming to an end. So these are machines that are built for a war that everyone prays will never happen, because if it does happen, everything has failed. Their use is a mark of failure.
While no one wanted this aircraft to be used for its awful purpose, it was essential that it worked flawlessly, to make clear to the world that it could. So throughout the Cold War, engineers worked tirelessly to keep the RAF fleet of bombers operational. It's been nearly 30 years since the last Victor was flown, and now it's a different group of IWM engineers working tirelessly to ensure this important link to the past is preserved.
One of the reasons we've had to strip this aircraft down so much is it's a very large aircraft. We've had to put it into a First World War hangar. You know, we've had to take the outer wings off, we've had to take the tailplane off and the fin off just to get it in the hangar to actually start doing this work. The aircraft composes of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of parts. You've got aluminium here, we've got wiring here, it's covered in rubber and nylon, and then you'll end up with a certain part of it's made out of wood, and they constantly deteriorate. And every one of those materials has to be treated in a different way to ensure its longevity.
I am currently making a repair section for the wing. The leading edge section here was falling to pieces. It had water trapped inside it for a long time, and this whole section here I had to sort of basically make from scratch.
Sometimes you get some nice surprises. I remember last year a young gentleman came through with his grandfather's logbook that actually flew this aircraft, and he'd never seen his grandfather. His grandfather died before he was born, and all of a sudden he'd got that connection with a family member. You know, that history, that solid connection that you didn't have before, which is the whole point of the museum in my eyes.
This has a story to tell, and it's a very important story. And in some ways, you know, this aircraft is more important than a lot of works of fine art, because this has something related to it which could have just ended up destroying the world and killing millions of people. It's such a worthwhile thing to do because it's unique. You know, if we lose this, there's not another one behind in somebody's shed. This is it.
Any object tells a story if you let it, and something like this, the size and complexity of this and the conflicts it was a part of, the stories it tells are incredible. They are resonant, they are important, and they help us understand the nature of the Cold War, the nature of the last 50 years, and help us also understand a little bit more about why we are where we are today.
While work's continuing to preserve the Victor for years to come, in central London, there's another impressive military machine that's been drawing the crowds for decades. Parked in a prime spot on the River Thames, HMS Belfast has become part of London's landscape. She's been decommissioned for nearly 60 years. But for the ship's yeoman, Stuart Paul, each day begins in the same way it would aboard any Royal Naval vessel.
It's part of the tradition that we've inherited from the Royal Navy. We have special permission to fly the white ensign, so part of that is that we follow etiquette. If we were to leave the flags up 24 hours a day, we wouldn't be following it. The biggest blunder you can do is flying it upside down, which is pretty difficult with a white ensign, but very easy with a Union flag. And I've seen that many times. I've only seen it once here, and it came down really quick. So it's bad luck if the flag hits the deck, so we've got to be careful that that doesn't happen.
The flag's been flying on this mast since 1939, when HMS Belfast, then one of Britain's largest and most powerful cruisers, was commissioned into the Royal Navy. She fired some of the first shots during the D-Day landings and played an active role in the Korean War, before being taken out of service in the 1960s and eventually towed into position in the Thames, where she's remained as a popular visitor attraction ever since.
It's flying very well there today, so you've got a good breeze there. When the ship's flying her flag, she looks alive. It's a nice sight, it's a beautiful sight. It does make you feel proud to work somewhere like Belfast.
With the flag raised for the day, work can begin. And a lot of work it is to keep an 83-year-old warship afloat for Conservation Manager Andy Curran.
There's certainly a lot to do. The ship's out in the elements and it corrodes very quickly. We've got to repaint the ship's sides. We've got to repair the upper decks. We're restoring one of the 4-inch gun mounts, plus we're restoring a 40mm anti-aircraft gun.
But the focus of Andy's attention this morning is a 16-foot-long fast motor launch. The Belfast would have had many smaller boats like this, for supply runs and for ferrying the captain, crew and mail between ships in the fleet. But years of exposure to the elements have taken their toll.
It's been set out in all weathers. The only boat we have left on board, so it'd be nice to get it away and get it preserved professionally. It's quite a hefty boat. It probably weighs 2 tons, and by far the safest way of taking it is by river. We've got a barge just coming alongside with a crane on it. They're going to crane it onto their barge, take it down the river, where it'll be loaded onto a loader lorry and then taken off to Duxford.
The only walking route from the deck of the Belfast to land is the narrow visitors' gangway, so floating cranes like this are crucial tools for the specialist heavy lifting team. The plan is to run harnesses called strops under the lifeboat, connected to the crane. But Andy's spotted a problem.
Have you got a spreader?
No. You don't really want to pinch it too much. If you want, test it, see what it looks like. If you're not happy with it, then we'll just have to get a spreader.
So we're worried they'll crush the boat by picking it up with the strops at an angle. So we asked them to put spreader bars in so all of the actual lifting points were vertical, and they haven't brought one. They stopped the strops on the crane from digging into the boat and actually squeezing it so they get a straight lift.
We'll put the slings under it and then we'll test it, and if we're happy we'll get it off. If not, then they're going to have to bring a spreader bar. Bring the crane after it, please. Slowly take the weight, please.
With the strops in place, the team is now carefully testing.
Yeah, try that.
To see if they can safely take the weight of the 2-ton boat.
I think we need to have a rethink on this.
Take the weight slowly, please.
No, that's it.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
It definitely needs spread. That's just gonna.
Gonna have to be a spreader bar, lads. Yeah, just
Yeah.
pinching it too much.
Andy's judged the risk of damage is too great and has sent the crane crew away to get extra equipment. It's a frustrating setback.
Oh dear.
But for conservation teams, looking after these objects is always the top priority.
Discover the past with exclusive history documentaries and ad-free podcasts presented by world-renowned historians, all from History Hit. Watch them on your smart TV or on the go with your mobile device. Download the app now to explore everything, from the wonders of ancient Pompeii and the mystery of the princes in the tower to the life of Anne Boleyn and D-Day. Sign up via the link in the description.
Moving large vehicles is also the focus for the team at the Duxford Museum in Cambridgeshire, as well as hangars full of vintage aircraft. The museum also runs a busy airfield, which welcomes thousands of flights a year, everything from small private planes to powerful warbirds.
Golf Cedar Mike, Freakle Family 135 705, runway 24 right, service wind 040. 4 knots, take off for discretion.
With hundreds of takeoffs and landings in a busy day, the airfield operations team need to safely move the aircraft about the tarmac to ensure the limited space is used efficiently. And they do that with the help of a team of volunteers.
So then, Sarah, how are you feeling for today then?
I'm feeling excited about doing this.
Yeah.
Sarah Stevens has been volunteering at Duxford for 3 years, during which time she's completed the classroom training to become an aircraft marshaller. But today is her first time on the tarmac with the paddles.
So the aircraft will be rolling off that end of the runway.
And then swinging round this way.
Yeah.
Yep.
First of all, instructor Johnny Nunn reminds her of the hand signals, her only way of communicating to the pilot.
We've got get me attention.
Yep.
Hands beside your side. Then you got straight ahead. That's it. Okay. You got turn left.
Turn left.
That's turn right.
Sorry, turn right.
That's it.
And that's turn left.
Yeah. Okay.
And then stop.
Stop. Yeah?
Left and right are the ones that you have to think about.
Left and right are the big ones that throw people.
Yeah.
Sarah couldn't afford to make a mistake like this if she'd had a vintage fighter plane bearing down on her.
I'm normally good with my left and rights, except on a day like this when you seem to forget it all.
Remember, whichever arm you're waving, that's the wing coming towards you, OK?
Yeah.
Johnny's confident Sarah's mastered her left and right and has cleared her to receive her first live aircraft. The challenge of parking warbirds, known as tail draggers, is that often the pilot has very little visibility of what's around them, so the marshal is crucial to avoid collisions. But before Sarah can be trusted with the most delicate military planes, she's being tested on a more modern Cessna 152 aircraft.
An aircraft, my first one to try and marshal in.
The pilot's visibility is still limited, which presents a danger to an inexperienced marshaller.
He's going to taxi up that end of the airfield, I think.
Ready, Sarah?
Bit nervous.
In order to maintain the correct line of sight with the pilot,
turning with the aircraft,
Sarah needs to keep the plane on her left-hand side as she marshals it in.
keep visual with the pilot.
It should have been on the other side.
But yeah, we'll work on it.
The pilots agreed to go around for another approach to allow Sarah one more chance.
Try again, just to make quite sure.
That's it, nice big bold signals. It's okay, coming ahead. Keep him coming. Well done, Sarah. Very well done.
I wouldn't have believed that 2 or 3 weeks ago I'd have done that. I'm an everyday person. I've not been a pilot. I would have never believed I would be out on the airfield marshalling aircraft. It's been absolutely fantastic.
The museum's millions of objects, uniforms, weapons, and vehicles are one way of telling the story of the past century of conflict. But they have another powerful tool to bring the past to life.
This is the museum's master film store. It houses 23,000 films.
Head of Film Matt Lee is responsible for one of the oldest and largest film archives in the world. It's his job to make sense of this vast collection and to try and solve some of the mysteries hidden within it.
There's always something new to see. When you open up a film canister, lace it up, and start to relive those moments that were captured 60, 70 years ago. That's always exciting.
These secure vaults hold some of the rarest and most historically important images of the past century, telling stories of struggle and conflict, triumph and hope.
In this film, if it's kept in the right conditions, it could last for another 100, 200, 300 more years. And that's one of the highlights of the job for me. This is a really interesting one, a German newsreel. This was captured after the Second World War, and this would have been shown to audiences in German cinemas at the time.
As well as delicate 35mm film reels, the museum also has massive state-of-the-art servers full of modern digital material.
We're talking about petabytes, not megabytes or gigabytes. It's huge volumes of material that has to be correctly stored and future-proofed. Nowadays, what we tend to get from the Ministry of Defence is hard drives, and these can contain tens of thousands of photographs or short clips, you know, terabytes and terabytes worth of data. We've always been really proud of being able to look after this collection, and perhaps the most rewarding aspect is being able to identify people in films, relieve people of their anonymity, understand about who appears in that film and why they appear in it. Now, I've probably looked at thousands of films, but there's one film in particular that's caught my imagination, and it relates to the Battle of the Somme, which is a feature film. Battle of the Somme was a hugely popular film. People were queuing to get inside. There were many screenings a day to try and cater for the sheer crowds. Around 16 million people viewed the film, and it was one of the most successful films of all time, right up until Star Wars, really.
But there's one particular scene from that film that even now, more than 100 years later, still holds an unanswered mystery.
It's probably the most well-known sequence that we've ever had, and it's one of the most popular sequences that gets screened in lots of documentaries. And it's a man walking towards the camera, piggybacking a wounded casualty. And this is taking place in no man's land on the 1st of July, 1916.
For years, Matt's been watching and re-watching the sequence to try and answer the question, who is this man?
And it's something that I probably spent a little bit too much of my time on, if I'm being honest.
This footage was shot on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, one of the most infamous battles of the First World War. British troops staged a huge offensive against the Germans, but were overwhelmed by the German artillery and machine guns. More than 19,000 men were killed in what remains the single bloodiest day in British military history. An account by the cameraman Geoffrey Mellons describes the terror of the trenches.
Heavy firing continued. I noticed several of our wounded men lying in shell holes, no man's land. They were calling for assistance. Every time a Red Cross man attempted to get near them, a hidden German machine gun fired. Several were killed whilst trying to bring in the wounded. The cries of one poor fellow attracted their attention of a trench mortarman. He asked for a volunteer to go with him and bring the poor fellow in. Together they climbed the parapet and threaded their way through the barbed wire very slowly. Nearer and nearer they crept. We stood watching with bated breath. Would they reach him? Yes, at last. But if you look really closely and you go into it frame by frame, you can actually see the casualty still breathing. His mouth is open, so he's still alive. Going out into no man's land, rescuing colleagues, it's an act of selfless heroism. And I think people want to associate themselves with that heroism. And I think that partly explains why we get a lot of people who have come forward to us over the years, putting names forward to identify who the man in the trench is carrying the wounded colleague.
In fact, Matt's been contacted by more than 100 families, claiming the man in this image was a relative.
People have sent us scans, historical records. I've almost created a dossier of evidence to try and prove the case that their relative is the person who appears in the film. And that's when the research takes on a more detective role.
Using the full power of the Imperial War Museum's archive systems, Matt is trying to piece together clues to try and identify the man in the Battle of the Somme film.
So we started to look at some of the photographs that were taken on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, and our attention was drawn to a similar scene of a soldier being carried along a trench. But we noted immediately it was a different man doing the carrying, not the man you see walking towards you in the trench. So once we started looking at the photographs in more detail, we were then able to find out that actually it's the same casualty that is being carried. You notice there was a shoulder flash here, a tear here, a little bit of fabric coming loose there. And of course, this kind of short, crew-cut hairstyle is the same in the film and the photograph. Clearly, different men were involved at different stages of the rescue. This photograph in itself is the first step to unlocking the story behind the rescue.
With 5 sites and millions of items under their care, the IWM has its work cut out, trying to keep everything safely preserved. A state-of-the-art document store houses more than 5 million individual items. Firearms specialists ensure the safety and condition of the thousands of weapons. And on the Thames, conservation manager Andy is constantly battling the elements to try and keep HMS Belfast ship-shape. His team is still working to safely remove the tender boat for restoration.
Are you going to carry on with the rest of that to go straight up to Duxford?
Yeah.
The floating crane has sailed back up the river with the correct gear, and now the delicate process of lifting her over the side of the ship can go ahead.
Swan.
With the boat finally on its way to the conservation team in Cambridgeshire, Andy's attention now turns to the ship's weapon system.
Over here, we've got our 4-inch gun mounts. We're actually doing a full restoration now by taking all the fittings out of it. They could fire out to about 12 miles. So from here in central London, it may be looking at somewhere like Croydon.
When these guns were fired in anger, the targets were far from South London. One of her most famous battles was in the ferocious conditions of the Arctic winter. In 1943, HMS Belfast was escorting a convoy of merchant ships as they carried supplies through the North Cape of Norway to the Soviet Union, when the fleet came under attack from the German battleship Scharnhorst. Belfast led the squadron's defense, and with hammering gunfire and a series of torpedo strikes, the German ship was sunk. From a crew of nearly 2,000 aboard the Scharnhorst, only 36 men survived. Although the guns haven't been fired for more than 50 years, Andy's team work hard to keep them in working order.
All right, I've got them. So these parts of the trigger.
I think we want to go to the blacksmith's with that.
OK. We'll take this into the workshop, examine it, see what needs to be cleaned off.
When she was in service, HMS Belfast would have had a crew of hundreds, all responsible for the maintenance of the ship. Today, all that's done by volunteers, like David Day.
This is from the right-hand barrel. It's part of the trigger circuit. I'm giving it a gentle brush just to remove any dirt, see what loose paint comes off. My original interest in the Belfast was the fact that my dad served on the ship. Chap in the back row with the black hat. He was on board from July 1962 to the end of 1963, which is the ship's very last commission. He was the last engineer to steam the ship at full power, with all 4 boilers fired up, all the engines running, going absolutely flat out. So I first came on board this ship when I was about 4 years old. I do like walking in Dad's footsteps. Just outside the wardroom is a wooden board that shows which of the ship's officers are on board the ship or ashore. My dad's name is on that, so I go and say hello to that every time I come on board. I always said that when I retired, I wanted to volunteer on the Belfast. I was in the Navy myself, and having spent a career in engineering, which ended up being IT, software, and so on, I wanted to get back to some proper engineering using hammers and spanners. Really, it's a way of honouring those that went before us.
While work continues aboard HMS Belfast, at the Master Film Store in Duxford, head of film Matt Lee is still working to solve a 100-year-old mystery of the identity of the man in this famous scene from the Battle of the Somme. His research has turned up a photograph of the same casualty being carried by another soldier on the same day.
We were able to identify the man, as you see here, with the cardigan on, as Tom Spencer. And he was taking the man in from what we think is no man's land down the trench.
Tom Spencer from Burley would have been 28 years old when this photo was taken, and records show he was lucky enough to survive the First World War. With one man identified, Matt's attention turns back to the mystery of who the man in the film was.
So we'd had over 120 identifications of the man carrying his wounded comrade down the trench. And one name had been suggested to us 3 times by 3 different family members.
Information Matt received from a member of the public suggests the man could have the surname Brennan, and that he might, in fact, be Irish.
So it kind of made sense that I hadn't found anything in the British press, so I started looking in the Irish press, turning through hundreds and hundreds of articles, until eventually I found something in the Sligo Champion in December 1916. Did any of you notice the brawny specimen of manhood who came into the limelight and walked, breathing heavily, across the sheet? He was a striking figure in the Somme film, and he was Irish. He is Gunner Charles Brennan. I am sure if Gunner Brennan was by my side in the Gillooly Hall, he would be able to make the film even more interesting than it was. So that was really quite seismic. That moment was a jaw-drop moment, and I was really quite excited by that.
After so many years of trying to solve the mystery of the man in the Battle of the Somme film, it's the closest Matt's team have come yet.
He is our strongest contender, but we're not able to put it to bed as much as I would like to.
And so, to be 100% certain, Matt's search continues, not only through the thousands of reels of film, but also through the museum's state-of-the-art digital store.
When more material has been digitised, when you can search for more material, it could be that the answer lies within our own archives, and I just need to find it. But I'm sure one day we will eventually get there.
Back at IWM London, work is progressing fast on the new Second World War and Holocaust galleries. They've expanded the museum's public space, gutting the cinema and education rooms, to rebuild them as ambitious and complex new galleries, telling the full global history of the Second World War.
In this gallery, it's looking at the British home front, and we are sort of focusing quite a lot in this area on the Blitz. In the showcase in the centre of the gallery, we're looking at civil defence personnel.
With the cases installed already, the pressure is now on curator Vicky Hawkins to find the right objects and stories to illustrate these lesser-known but vitally important civil defence roles.
I'm not sure how quickly you'd be able to get that on in time for a fire raid, I'll be honest. We've got here a jacket that belongs to a member of the Auxiliary Fire Service. They supported the London Fire Brigade because there were so many fires, especially during the Blitz, but throughout the whole of the war. It'll have trousers, boots, oilskin leggings, a helmet, which we've got here today as well.
But for Vicky to really engage the museum's audience, she needs to find an individual story from a firefighter to bring it to life.
So having a personal element is really exciting for us. It allows our visitors to feel more connected to the people that we're talking about and help them to maybe understand more about what their life was like.
More than 28,000 firefighters were recruited to the AFS during the war. And there's one in particular who's caught Vicky's eye.
George Arthur Roberts, his name keeps coming up quite a lot when I've been doing my research, and it was quite clear that he was very much prominent within the West Indian community during the Second World War. We don't really know a huge amount about George just from this image, so it'd be great to find out maybe what he did before the war, why he chose to join the AFS, and what was his life like and the experiences of being in New Cross when there were so many bombing raids. And it'd be great if I could find a descendant to chat about his experiences in a bit more detail.
While Vicky continues her research, in the middle of the Thames, it's all hands on deck as HMS Belfast prepares for the summer rush. Operations Manager Daniel Schnabel is overseeing work across all 9 decks of this huge warship.
It is quite easy to get lost if people are not actually familiar with it and they haven't never been here before. Also, you have to watch out, make sure that you're not too vertically challenged. So, mind your head, look forward, as you can hear. As a kid, I made the Airfix model kit of HMS Belfast and sat there scrupulously making sure the paint colour was correct and that every areas and all the details. And little did I think that a few years down the line, I would be on here overseeing her real painting as well.
While Daniel's making sure Belfast is looking her best, other teams are working hard on hidden features which will help bring the ship to life.
Has the smell thing been put in yet? The scent canisters, yeah.
The exhibition manager, Lucy Tyndall, is trialling new scents, which will be discreetly piped throughout the ship to recreate how it would have smelt during battle.
We've always had smells on the ship, but smell technology has advanced since we'd first did it. So the range of smells that are available and how appropriate that they are to the ship is something that we need to kind of look at again.
Oh yeah, you definitely get that hospital cleaning product.
While some of the tricks the museum uses are as subtle as a hidden fragrance, others are a bit more aggressive.
So we're in the aft, or the back of the ship. This is called the Y turret, and in here we have 3 massive guns. It's really atmospheric, and it's quite intimidating as well. When the sailors were in here, there was 27 of them at a time, so you're going to have to give an impression that it was an extremely close and extremely intense situation to be in.
To give visitors a sense of the stress and pressure those 27 men would have felt during battle, the onboard audio-visual manager, Chaz Reynolds, has installed something known in the museum industry as a butt kicker.
A butt kicker is like a subwoofer. It will vibrate low frequencies outside of the human hearing. Because you won't be able to hear the audio, you will only feel it, and it gives a really lifelike experience when it comes to things like simulations of gun explosions, etc., etc. So I'll just get it running now. Very, very soon, you should hear the guns go off. There we go. Definitely still working, that's for sure. Yeah, that was really, really loud, and you can really feel it underneath your feet as well.
While tricks like butt kickers and hidden smells are good ways to bring in the crowds, the most poignant way the museum can explain the history of conflict is through personal stories. At IWM London in Lambeth Road, curator Vicky Hawkins wants to explain the role of the civil defence teams during the Second World War. She's invited in Sam Harding, the great-granddaughter of George Arthur Roberts, a prominent member of the Auxiliary Fire Service, to see the uniforms before they go on display, and also to understand more about his extraordinary life.
The first time I heard about my great-granddad was from my great-aunt, who just gave me the most amazing stories about this man who fought in World War I. He fought at the Somme, he fought at Loos, and he was reported in every week magazine as actually throwing bombs back over enemy lines.
Throwing bombs back?
So he used to pick them up with his bare hands and throw them back.
Wow.
An incredibly brave thing to do. So, of course, he went forward to try and participate in World War II and was told he was too old.
Yep.
So he joined the Auxiliary Fire Service.
So I've actually spoken to the London Fire Brigade to see if they could give us a little bit more information about New Cross and the experiences that he might have had. I've got a couple of images which show some of the raids that happened in New Cross. Some of these are from some of the local roads very close by. So much devastation and the clouds of smoke, and it's very probable that he would have attended.
And I noticed this one under here.
This one here, yeah.
Because you get that real sense of smoke and the dust and the chaos. Guys rushing around and, oh, yeah.
It's a hugely dangerous job, and by May 1945, they had lost 327 firemen and women and 3,000 who were seriously injured.
Really? It brings it to life because this wasn't something he shared, and if you think about it, it must have been quite horrific, actually.
Yes. I imagine from the photographs here, George was probably amongst one of the only black men that were actually working at the fire station. Yeah. Did he ever talk about that?
The main thing he did during those times when they were waiting for the bombs to fall in the Blitz, he started these discussion groups that ended up becoming like 15,000 members just in the London area.
Gosh, wow.
With firemen just talking about the issues of the day. That would, of course, have been an overhang from his work with the League of Coloured Peoples, where debate and discussion and writing was part of the way the LCP worked.
George was very politically active and was the founding chairman of the LCP, one of London's first anti-racist organisations.
I've seen some images of George in some of these discussion groups in the picture posts. You can see he's quite a powerful character.
Yeah.
It's great to be able to see him in this context as well and see him in his element, so to speak.
That came out of, what do we do? Do we twiddle our thumbs while we wait, or do we do something useful?
George Arthur Roberts was awarded the British Empire Medal for his service in the AFS and as a founder and pioneer of the discussion and education groups of the fire service. For his great-granddaughter, Sam, George's role as the first black firefighter in the AFS is a source of great pride.
The London Fire Brigade have been brilliant paying tribute to that, using him as their symbol for 100 years of the Fire Brigades Union, paying tribute to the fact that he sort of opened the door for lots of other black recruits who joined the AFS after him.
Wow, that's fantastic. What an amazing legacy.
Yeah.
I think what I learned today is that George was so much more than just a man who wore this uniform. He really paved the way for black people in Britain to be part of these national services, to be on the front line.
The thought of my great-grandfather George being displayed in the Imperial War Museum, you know, this place I used to come to as a child. And here I am, and my great-grandfather is going to be here in an exhibition for 20 years. It's an incredible honour. We're all really excited about it.